Hi, I'm Anna McEwen, and this is The Epic Narrative. And now, my dad, Bob Switzer.
I hope you caught last week, and I guess if you didn't, I'm going to talk more about it because it keeps rattling around in my head. But this story, remember that these stories are indicators about a life, about lives. So the life of Amnon was one of selfishness and arrogance and domination and control. He wasn't a good guy. And then of course, Tamar, I'm wrecked for her. She's probably between the age of 13 to 15 years old, which I know technically in our culture would be horrible to be married at that young. And I personally, I advocate, for the end of human trafficking and sex slavery. I just think that's just horrific. It's horrific. It's worse than the pandemic. It's way worse. It's just bad. Sorry, I won't head down that road, but we can talk about it some other time if you want to ask me. But in the culture of the Middle East, you were considered, you just matured sooner. That's just what was expected of you. You were not this whole teenage world that many in Western culture live in was kind of created by the Western culture. Most cultures don't have a teenage world where you have like little to no responsibility and everything is given to you. Your education, your experiences, your vacations, all that stuff. It's just something we created. So it's hard sometimes to read that or hear that and think, think within the culture of the moment. But she would have been considered of marriable age. She would have been considered, she probably knew that somewhere soon she would be a wife. And then she's raped. And she does everything right. She tries to reason with him. She resists him. And then even after it's done, she's still advocating for a righteous way out of this, to say, listen, don't kick me out of your house. At least if you keep me here, we can get married. We can still fix this. And he throws her out anyway. And then she lives the rest of her life in exile, which is bizarre. She loses everything. All of her hopes of being honorably married are gone. All her hopes of being a mother are gone. She no longer can wear the robes of the young virgins in David's household. I'm sure she was invited to, and maybe even occasionally would show up at large gatherings and festivals. Remember the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar is awesome in that every month there's a party, except the only one that doesn't is the Day of Atonement, and that's only a day. And then it ends, the day of fasting, right? It ends with a party. So like God clearly was, when he's speaking to and laying out his calendar, he wants his people to be a people of community, a people of happiness, a people of dancing and singing and drinking, and it's an awesome calendar, and they would have followed that calendar. So I don't know how participatory Tamar was in these sort of events. I have a feeling her sisters came and talked to her. I'm sure she had friends who came and consoled her, but she never marries and lives. It says she lives the rest of her life in there in Absalom's house in disgrace. It's a desolate woman. It's described. It's a nuanced word that she never fully recovers. And Absalom, right, we're introduced to him, like his response is crazy. because he clearly is a patient man who carries bitterness deeply. He carries offense deeply. And his whole thing, it says, Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he disgraced Tamar. So here's a man who has he would have been like a great poker player. He carried his emotions, and I don't think emotions are bad, but he carried them inside. He didn't let them out. This is a depth of deception. That's what this is. So we get a picture of Absalom, that he is somebody who carries hatred, bitterness, and offense. He carries it deep, and he carries it for a long time. He deceives people because he doesn't say anything to Amnon. And like I said last week, I would imagine Amnon was pretty nervous the first time all the brothers got together in a room or in the courtyard. He probably expected Absalom to come to him and say something. He said nothing. He just didn't talk to him. And I'm sure he had enough brothers and cousins and uncles, etc. around. He didn't need to. I'm sure Absalom he was the crown prince. He was gorgeous. He was incredibly distinctive in his mannerisms, in the way he carried himself, and his looks. And everybody was looking to him. And deep inside, Absalom hated Amnon and was plotting to kill him. And that's where we pick up verse 23. 2 years later, he has been planning the death of Amnon for 2 years. That's the type of deception that Absalom lives in. I'm sure he laughed with his father and met with his father and hung out in council meetings. He was being trained. He was being taught. He went to worship. He came out of worship. He went to all the festivals. He did everything he was expected to do. Everybody would follow him. He's an amazing actor. 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep shearers were at Bel-Hazah, near the border of Ephraim, and he invited all the king's sons to come. And Absalom went to the king and said, "Your servant had shearers come, and will the king and his attendants please join me?" And David's like, No, I can't really. All of us should not go. We would be only a burden to you. Although Absalom urged him, he still refused. But he gave him his blessing. And Absalom said, "Well, if you will not, then let my brother Amnon come with us." "Oh, why would he want to go with you?" He's like, I just really, really would like him to come. I just really think it'd be great if he came. So Absalom urged him, and he sent with him Amnon and the rest of the king's sons. This is Absalom. He wanted David there because he wanted David to see that Absalom is going to be a better disciplinarian of Amnon than David was. He's going to do to Amnon what David should have done. He believes that Amnon should have been put to death for raping his sister and disgracing her for the rest of her life. And David refused to go. He refused to go. He said, "I'll be a burden on you," which is somewhat true. And what he basically, sheep shearing is again another time of festivities. It's another time of owners hanging out in the field with all of the workers and the shearers. A lot of them were almost like migrant work. Like you would be a sheep shearer, which took some skill because it wasn't like they had buzz clippers that they do now, and it still takes skill. I've seen them done. It's pretty impressive. These guys that can shear sheep electronically, and then I've seen the old style actual clippers. But even so, they're only old to me. They're not ancient like they would be here. So this is a skill to shear the sheep. And you would be hired and brought into these pens where all of the particular owner, in this case Absalom, all of Absalom's livestock that he's been, that he has as a royalty that's been given to him, that constitutes his wealth and influence. All of his sheep are being herded into one area at this town, Bel Hazor. All of them come in, and the sheep shearers work, and they work all day, and then at night there's a lot of food, a lot of drink, and everybody has a good time, and it's just an excuse to get together. It's, picture it like a Labor Day weekend or Memorial Day weekend. It's like, hey, here's another excuse to get together. 4th of July, let's party. Like, let's have a bunch of people over. That's the type of attitude that shearing season would bring, and people would be like, hey, great. Maybe we'll get invited over this rich person's shearing party because, they're going to have great food and drink, and we can all celebrate and look at how rich they are. That's another way of doing it. And honestly, some parties are like that too, right? People invite you over, and they just throw great parties because they have a lot of money. And in some ways, they're just letting people enjoy the blessings that they have. They're good hosts. And Absalom was that type of person. Remember, he's incredibly deceptive. It's fascinating to me. 2 years he did this, which probably means that he can, from the moment, maybe not the moment, well, probably actually, from the moment that he's holding Tamar and he deduces from what she's saying and the weeping she's got and the ashes on her head, he deduces that she's been raped. And he knew it was Amnon. Now, I don't know if she said something or if everyone kind of knew that he was falling in love with this girl, that he had a crush on Tamar. And Absalom, being the big brother, might have been aware of the fact that she was asked specifically by Amnon to come to his house to make bread. And in doing so, he would have been aware that this making of the bread was actually an invitation to get to know her. Like there was probably something in his senses and with the nuances of the Hebrew that said, all right, he's inviting her over. It's not really a date, but it would have been a curiosity thing. So when she comes back from his home in ashes, torn clothes, he knows, clearly something happened. He says, what, did he rape you? Yes. And he immediately goes into deception. This kind of behavior doesn't happen overnight. He's been training himself. He's been making choices for years to not show his emotions, to not let people know what he's thinking, to go along with the motions of the day and the circumstances without letting people know what's going on internally. Now, I don't know if he got that advice from his mother. I don't know if he got it from advisors. The kings, royalty need to keep their emotions in check. But whatever it was, he immediately goes into deceptive mode. And he says, all right, don't let this bother you. Don't take this thing to heart. I need you to calm down because we can't let the whole world know what happened here. The people are going to hear you wailing and crying, and they're going to see me hugging you. This is, I need to get control of the circumstances so I can drive the results. And he waited for his dad to find out what happened. And David finds out what happened, and David was heartbroken, but he didn't do anything. He just let it ride. And like I said last week, I don't know why. Because he was furious. But he couldn't bring himself to call Amnon in and even yell at him. He did nothing. So from Amnon's perspective, he has to be thinking, everybody's good with this. I raped a woman. No one's coming after me. Dad's not doing anything. I'm sure he waited, maybe a week, and then he figured out I'm good. What I did is acceptable. What I did is fine. I'm guessing that his friend, his cousin Jonadab, was pretty happy with his plan too. And Amnon's like, Jonadab probably showed up later on that day and said, "Hey, how'd it go?" And he was like, "Man, it wasn't as good as I thought. She resisted. She didn't think I was, she wanted me to marry her." Ridiculous. I don't think I like her at all. Jonadab's probably like, "What? Yeah, man." He goes, "Dude, you were sick over her." I know. I don't know what I was thinking. She's a jerk. She's kind of ugly. I don't like her. Because it says he hated her after he raped her. He hated her with more hatred than with the love he had before he raped her. And I'm sure, as I tried to cover last week, his whole motive in raping her was, she's going to fall in love with me and we will be an amazing couple together, because all I need to do is have sex with her and she's going to be so impressed with me. Oh, men. Sorry. Oh, yes. We need to move on in the story, Bob. I know. But I wanted to get those nuances, that what we're seeing is a lifestyle of these guys. The deception of Absalom is a lifestyle. 2 years later, he's having, the sheep shearers are coming, and I have a feeling he knew he was going to kill Ammon if his dad didn't do anything, and his dad didn't do anything. So he started to plan, and he was like, "Okay, I need to get Amnon away," or maybe not. Like, maybe he's thinking this needs to be public. This needs to be now. This needs to be in the dark. Like, do I sneak in at night, slit his throat? Do I cut off his wingding, make him eat it? I don't know. I mean, this Ammon is angry and full of hate and deception, and I'm sure there were creative ways that people had dealt with rapists before. And he waited. And then I have a feeling, like a year prior, he thought about the sheep shearing. And while he was there, he's looking around and he's like, "This actually would work really well. This would be good." Yeah. And then he started thinking, all right, let's see who should be here. Well, I need to teach Dad a lesson. I need to show him his weakness. I need to show the world, or at least a group of people out here, I need to show them that my father is not the leader he should be. Now, I really think he was thinking this direction because of what he does later on in life. Years later. I don't think this, I don't think his taking over of the palace, which happens years later, I don't think that started, just on a whim. It's been cultivated, whether through pride or through personal counselors he had or friends that he had. Internally, he just kept banging away at his mental drum that my father is not as good of a king as he could be. He has flaws, he has weaknesses, and this is one of them. And I need to show the world that he is weak. I'm going to kill Amnon in front of him because of what he did to Tamar, and the fact that he did nothing to protect my sister. Nothing. And of course, the virgins and family, the royal family, and especially the virgins, were representations of the nation and all the women of the nation. And the fact that David didn't protect her would have been an indication that David could not protect the nation. Like, it was a in Christianese, we'd call it a prophetic sign that David was weak at defending the weak and the innocent and the pure. And when that innocence is taken, he does nothing to discipline or put to death those who stole the innocence and purity of those innocent and pure. Oh yeah, Absalom had layers of offense that he had built up against his father. And I think he planned out his attack, and he waited another whole year because it worked in his mind. He was like, I could have them all out. We could have a big party. No one's going to be, suspect. And then he had to plan out his escape because he knew if he kills his brother and he does it publicly, he can't just go back home. So he starts making arrangements to go back to his maternal grandfather, who was king over a small kingdom about 80 miles away in a place called Gersher, something along that line. And there he is. He puts together the plan. Now he needs some help. So, verse 28, he ordered his men, listen, when Amnon is high in spirits from drinking wine, and I say to you, strike Ammon down, then kill him. Don't be afraid. Haven't I given you this order? Be strong and be brave. So Absalom's men did to Ammon what Absalom had ordered. Then all the king's sons got up and mounted their mules and ran, and they fled. So everything, he speaks to the servants. I don't think he spoke to them like in the moment, because it would have looked obvious. All his brothers are like, they all show up. It's not like a line of individuals. They show up, they have their servants, they have at least a couple of attendants each. They bring some food like you would to any celebration. They bring some drink. They bring maybe a gift or a game. Like it was the idea that, hey, all the brothers are getting together for a party. Dad's not coming, but all of us are going to be there. It'll be fun. It's at Absalom. Absalom's the richest one around, the best looking one. Like he's invited all of us to be there. We should go. This is important. This is fun. This is going to be a good time. And they all show up, and they're all watching, and they're all drinking and eating and having a good time. And the servants were already in on the plan, the ones who were going to kill him. And he probably had already paid them in advance, or at least made them aware of where the money was, because they're not going to be able to go home either. And he says, so Absalom's men did to Ammon what Absalom said. So he waited. Again, you're talking about deception. You're talking about internal hate. You're talking about somebody who probably looked like he was drinking a lot, but wasn't. He always had a cup in his hand, and he's laughing, and he's cheering, and he's, toasting, and all the brothers are having a good time. I have 3 sons and a daughter. You put all the siblings in the room together, and good times just start happening. Conversations start happening. Jokes start happening. They start laughing, and they start telling stories about their, because we don't all live near each other, and that would have been true for these guys. They didn't all live on top of each other. They didn't all share a room. They all had, many of them already had families. They had jobs that put them around the various nation, whether they were priests or worshipers or overseeing certain markets. I mean, they just had a good time. And Absalom watched, and he waited. He waited for Amnon to get high in spirits from drinking wine. So I don't know what time of night this is, because alcohol hits people at different levels. But I'm guessing it's dark, but probably not too late, because Absalom knows he has to flee. He has to head in a different direction. He's got an 80-mile trip to get to his grandfather's house. Now, the reason why all the brothers were there, but specifically, Absalom had asked for the firstborn, Amnon. I mean, he asked for Amnon specifically because Amnon was, at that point, the firstborn and the crown prince. Amnon was the next in line to be king. So all the way back, I'm sorry, you can't, I don't think you can overstate the deception. He invites David. He makes David feel wanted. He makes David feel welcomed. He makes sure David's okay for Amnon to be there, representing the crown. Like, he's like, okay, Dad, if you're not coming, can you send the crown prince? And all the other brothers would have been part of the cover. He was like, I've invited everybody. All the brothers are coming, but of course the crown prince needs special permission from you for anything he does because he's the crown prince. So I'd like him to come. And David's like, yes, I appreciate how much you love me and you wanted me there, but yes. Now, this town that they were at was 15 miles away. But it was 15 miles closer to where Absalom was going to run. So that's part of his plan. It wasn't a random town. He picked a town that was actually going to put him 15 miles closer to his exile. Everyone's happy, but he waited until Amnon was especially happy. And I'm guessing Absalom, not out of the ordinary, but made sure that Amnon, the crown prince, was cared for and given the best wine and constantly refilled and the party, the plan went forward. And he says to his servants, strike him down. Now, I don't think he stood up and yelled the order. I think he probably called his man over, or his men, and he's like, do it now. Maybe Amnon had, when you get filled with alcohol, you get filled with, often, your filters are down. So we've already determined that Amnon was a very prideful, arrogant, expected compliance. He was the crown prince. He was whatever. He was who who all that would be. And I'm guessing when he had alcohol in him, he was probably more of a jerk than usual. And there he was, ready to go. He calls over his men, kill him. They walk up behind him, and they killed him just as they'd been ordered. And it says all the king's sons got up. Like, they see what's happening. They see the servants come around Amnon and slit his throat. Well, of course, all of them believe they're under attack. All of them believe that they're next. Like they don't know Absalom's in on it. All they know is that the crown prince has been killed. They're all princes as well. So they all run, including Absalom. He's running, but he takes his mule and heads a different direction. These guys flee. And while they were fleeing back 15 miles in the dark, while they're fleeing back, report comes to David. Absalom has struck down all the king's sons. Not one of them is left. Now, I don't know who ran this in and got there before everyone else did. I don't know how David gets this report, but it comes fast. If the king's sons are on mules, maybe this guy had a horse and just took off. I don't know. But word comes to David that Absalom killed everyone. David tears his clothes. He starts to cry. He's laying on the ground. His attendants also hit the ground. They're devastated. All the king's sons are dead. The whole realm is now going to be in jeopardy. Everything that David has built is going to be in jeopardy. But Jonadab, well, look who's back in the story. He comes up and he says, No, my lord. Do not think that all the princes are dead. Only Amnon is dead. For this has been Absalom's express intention ever since the day Amnon raped his sister Tamar. May the Lord the king should not be concerned about the report of all the king's sons are dead. Only Amnon is dead. Jonadab knew about this plan. That little weasel knew exactly what was going to happen, and he did nothing to stop it. All he did was observe. Cousin Jonadab, in all the, I guess, right places at the right time. He knew that this had been the plan from the day Tamar was raped, because David did nothing to the crown prince. Crazy that Jonadab knew about this. Now, maybe within the culture of family and offense, and because Joab, the general, right, he felt the same way. He was like, his brother was killed, even in an act of war. His brother was killed, and he wanted to exact revenge for his brother. The family revenge motif of this culture is very strong. But it doesn't always get acted on. It's an offense that gets held sometimes for generations. In America, we have, an old story called, the Hatfield and McCoy. Like it's this old generational offense that occurs. Shakespeare, right? In Romeo and Juliet, the two families have been at war with each other for years. So family offenses were things that often were held on to, but not always moved on. You just held on to this offense. You held on to this, to the right moment to bring it up and to let everyone know, I have not forgiven you yet. So Jonadab maybe had heard from Absalom, or heard from Absalom's servants, or observed, or somehow Absalom had let this out or indicated that he had an offense that he was holding against Tamar. Now, I know it seems weird because he seems like he's so deceptive and calculating and cold, but he had to have let enough people know about what was going on so he could pull it off. And Jonadab was one of those people who knew. He knew about the whole plan. Because when because he isn't at the party, he's at the palace, and the word comes in that everybody's dead, and Jonadab knows immediately, no, that wasn't the plan. That's not the plan. No, Absalom only killed Amnon because he raped Tamar. Like he sees the devastation of David. He sees the devastation of all of David's attendants. And what does he want? Well, his main job in life was to be the hero, to be the one that everybody needed around them. So information was key to Jonadab. He collected information. He picked up on rumors. He found gossip. He had informants. He had servants that kept an eye out for things. Jonadab was quite the character. And in the realm of like a movie, you can picture, there's characters you just know would fit this. And so he comes in and he's now the hero, right? He's the comforter. He's the one that David now needs around him. And he goes running in, and he probably, kneels down next to David, and he puts his hand on him. He's like, David, don't worry. David, it's okay. It's okay. Absalom only killed Amnon. Your sons are all alive. He only killed them. He's been talking about this for a couple years. Since Tamar was raped, he's wanted to kill the crown prince. Everybody knew this. Like, he's like, I'm sorry. Now the man standing watch saw all these people on the road running. The dust is coming up. The moon is out. The way that roads were ideally made coming into a city like this, especially a capital city, the all visual impairments would have been removed for miles, so that the people on the towers could see what was coming. They could see dust. They could see, if it wasn't dusty, they could tell these are people walking. These are people on horses. These are people on mules. That was their job. And you would have maybe a mile or more of preparation if you saw something of an emergency. You could have time to close the gates. You could have time to put guards in position with arrows and slings, that sort of thing. So he sees a big cloud of dust developing. He knows that there's a group of people coming, and he yells out, I see men coming down from this side, on the side of the hill. I see a group coming. And Jonadab looks at David. He goes, see, I told you. All your sons are fine. It's happened just like I told you. I know exactly what happened. Absalom was fled. Ammon is dead. All your sons are fine. And as he's pleading and interacting with David, it says the sons start coming in and they're crying. They're like, Dad, you can't believe what happened. And everybody wept because the crown prince was dead. And Absalom, the tall, handsome, calculated, the one that everyone looked up to, he was gone and would be gone forever, as far as anyone was concerned at this point. And David mourned for the loss of his son. He mourned many days. Not only was he the crown prince, but I think David was also mourning the fact that he was not the father that he could have been. He was mourning the fact that he had let his replacement, his crown prince, as they would have been known, if it was going to follow the line that it was supposed to follow, he was next in line. I don't think it was required. As long as you had a son, a family member that would take over, that was all that was required. The king just had to. If the king didn't name the next king, then the next one in line would have been crowned. Like the elders, the nation would have just automatically gone to who was next in line. But a king could also name the next king, as long as technically, as long as it was a son, he could name his replacement. And I think David mourned all of that. He mourned the fact that Absalom, this handsome, stunning, brilliant young man, had taken into his hands killing of his brother. I mean, as much as David had been rejected by his brothers, he had never sought to kill them. He only sought to reunite the family. And as much as David understood the pain that Absalom might have been feeling when nothing happened to Amnon, he also mourned the fact that Absalom didn't come to him and say, Dad, you have to do something. So David again was reminded, I haven't been the father I need to be. I didn't give him any way out. I didn't discipline Amnon. I didn't train Absalom in the ways that he should have gone. Like, yes, he was at the worship sets, and yes, he's been at the festivals, but I never really taught him how to move with God and how to connect with God. I mean, I made it available. I told him, to meet with the priest or get together with Nathan, but I mean, there was so much that David, I'm sure, mourned over all of this. And Absalom went his 80 miles. No one pursued him. He traveled, I'm guessing, traveled light. Maybe even brought the servants who had cut the Ammon's throat. And he stayed there 3 years. Now it makes note of that. King David longed to go to Absalom, for he was consoled concerning Amnon's death. So that last verse, Absalom flees. He goes to Geshur, where, like I said, it was his maternal grandfather. It throws out there that he was there for 3 years, and the whole time David wants to bring him back, but he can't because of what he did. David wants to do it, but he can't because he killed the crown prince. Like, how can I just say, come back home, son? This is a dilemma that becomes well known in the culture of the kingdom. It becomes really well known in the culture of the palace, and So I need you to like remember this all the way back to Bathsheba, which now is 4 years ago, if I did my math right. David had brought great offense to a very prominent family in the palace. Ahithophel, his most trusted counselor, had been looking for a place that he could start bringing about the downfall of David, because what David did was inexcusable as a king. Bathsheba's father was also offended by what David did. And even though Bathsheba bore another son, and it was, named Solomon, and David loved Bathsheba and favored her, that was nice for the father to see, but David had caused a rift. And I believe Ahithophel was observing all of this, and he saw the rape of Tamar, and he watched David's lack of discipline for the crown prince, and he watched Absalom. And he probably picked up on some of the rumors that Absalom wanted to kill Amnon. And he might not have known all the dirt that he actually had made plans and actually was going to kill him, but he knew that there was a hatred there, a bitterness there, a calculated coldness in the life of Absalom that would have made Ahithophel alert. He would have noted it, because it would have given him, as a counselor, he would have known, all right, I have access. If I can manipulate that hate, I can use it against David. And then Amnon gets killed, and Absalom runs to exile. And because of what we know happens later, there's no way that what happens later happens without Ahithophel's years of plotting. Years of calculated information and meetings that he had all around the country with all the various elders of the nation. This is a big deal for these next 3 years. And I don't know if it's during this time, but I'm thinking it is that during this time he lets Bathsheba know that Solomon is going to be his choice to replace him, because that becomes a known fact. And I don't know when he started to say that, but I think Nathan picked up on that as well. And I don't know if he told Nathan or if Bathsheba told Nathan, but both Nathan and Bathsheba are clearly aware that David had promised Solomon the throne. So Absalom's in exile, and Ahithophel starts laying the groundwork for his return and overthrow of the father. And this takes, he has to be so careful. That's why I think it took 3 years. And the whole time, Ahithophel keeps an eye on David, and David keeps wanting to bring Absalom home. He keeps wanting to do it. So Ahithophel knows, like, this is a weakness in David. As much as David wasn't a great father, he was desperate for family, because he didn't have one growing up. He wanted the brothers to be united. He wanted them all together, like in the family. And Absalom had done a horrible thing and ran to exile, and yet there was nothing David could do to bring him back. And Ahithophel saw that as a weakness. It didn't have to be, but that's the way Ahithophel saw it. He knew how to manipulate that pain in David to keep him weak. He knew that he could manipulate the hate and bitterness of Absalom to move him toward an overthrow. And he could use the whole situation with Bathsheba and with Tamar as a way to start putting doubt in the elders' minds and the leaders of the various tribes around the nation, he could put doubt in their minds regarding David's leadership of the nation, and that maybe David was too old. Maybe David had gotten too weak emotionally and couldn't make the right kind of decisions that the nation would need in order to move forward. This is really, I think it's really important in this epic narrative to remember this. You can't just read the story, the words that are on the paper, and be like, well, that's what happened. Because what happened next is also really important. And somehow, in all of this, I think Ahithophel started to manipulate even people in the military. I don't think he told them, listen, I've got a plan to overthrow David. He just manipulated them to do things and say things that would bring David, make David continually mourn for Absalom, to make him, to play on his pain and continue to keep him weak, at least visually weak, so that he could continue the plot against him. Ahithophel is a brilliant counselor and a wonderful man. But if you carry offense, everything that God can use for good, the enemy can use against you, and he can destroy you. People talk about that often. Like there's people who in their identity with God are amazing encouragers. But when they are not walking with the Lord, when they're not aware of God's goodness within them, they become amazing people at cutting other people down and criticizing. That's one of the things that I try and keep in mind when there's a lot of negativity around somebody. I think, okay, what is the exact opposite of this? Because that would be what God has actually called them to be. If a person's, always without hope, I know that God has actually gifted them to be somebody who can bring hope. If I meet somebody who can never be at peace, they're constantly agitated, they're constantly having issues and stress, I know that the Lord has given them a spirit of peace that is designed to bring peace everywhere they go. But what does the enemy do? The enemy comes in to steal, kill, and destroy. If I see somebody who's sad, who just can't find any happiness in life, I know that internally they're designed to carry joy. And if they become aware of God's goodness within them, they will carry joy to all who are around them. And I can go on and on and on. I'm telling a story. I'm not, I can preach too. But you get the picture. And I think Ahithophel was a wise, creative, amazing counselor. But bitterness gave the enemy access. And Ahithophel lost the awareness of God's presence, and he just started to plot. And he saw David as weak, and he saw David as replaceable, and he saw an opportunity for his strong, handsome, dominating personality in Absalom. And he said, I've got the perfect replacement. And he's related to David, like he's a son of David. So like the line of David won't be broken, and the house of David will remain, but we need a new king. We need somebody we can trust, somebody who can lead us, somebody who's strong, somebody who will discipline when somebody in the royal family rapes somebody else, he'll be disciplined. They're not going to be left alone. He's going to be disciplined. He's not going to go around and steal other people's wives and rape them and commit adultery. And I would not be surprised if during this whole time Ahithophel and the wisdom he was giving David was more, I'll say, common rather than amazing. Because often when you give yourself into bitterness and the enemy starts, takes that access road, that on-ramp into your life, He's not happy till everything's destroyed. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ahithophel's wisdom that he would get from heaven wasn't quite as amazing as it always had been. But he had such an amazing reputation that, that it was still good. I'm not saying that he turned into an idiot, but he was working. He was working deep undercover at this point. And we'll pick up next week because this plot goes all over the nation. And that doesn't happen overnight, even though technically it's just the next chapter. But this plot is brilliant. Is brilliant. Ahithophel was not an idiot, even if he was being influenced by the enemy at this point. All right. Have yourself a great day, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. And let's talk some more next week.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.